Should we start? Yeah, we should start. I have some remarks at the beginning anyway, so people can trickle in, even though not that many people are here. A lot of people are joining, hopefully, online. Okay, so welcome. This is the first Vis Arts program paper session this week. Again, the title of the VISAP this year is Mingling Spaces. My name is Uta Hinrichs. I'm going to co-chair this session together with Bon Asaniero. And we have like really kind of a super interesting lineup of talks. Before we dive into this, I just want to very briefly talk a little bit about the submission process and the reprocess and submission numbers this year. So we had 3 tracks to submit to: papers, pictorials, which are more like visual reflections on design processes, and artworks. And for the papers and pictorials, we had 4 reviewers. One of them was part of the organizing committee, and then we had 3 external reviewers. And for the artworks, we had 4 reviewers for papers and pictorials, and for the artworks, we had 3 reviewers, sometimes 4, again, 1 OC member and the rest external. The submission rate was quite good. For papers, we had 7 submissions, 2 of them were accepted, leading to kind of like an acceptance rate of 28.6%. So paper submissions were actually slightly up compared to last year. We had 9 pictorial submissions, 6 of them were accepted, 75% acceptance rate. And they were also slightly up submissions on pictorials. And artworks, the submissions were also up, 46 submissions and 14 accepted. So we accepted slightly more artworks this year, leading to a slightly higher acceptance rate of 30.4%. So it's really great. I think the community is really active, which is great. So for this session, we actually have grouped papers a little bit thematically. The first group of artist talks and paper talks are going to talk around mingling perspectives, and the second one is more kind of like spatially oriented. Bon will share this one. So I just want to, without further ado, to hand it over to the first, or introduce a first speaker that we have today. Sorry, I just need to switch. You should set up. So while the first speaker is setting up, tutorial is called Shifting Winds, Gendered Structures of Academic Mentorship by Jabo Li, Huan Liu, Jilyi Zhang, Di Wu, Yingding, and Alec McGale will do the presentation. They are from the UT Austin and Cornell University, so take it away.
Really does not appear to be working.
Oh.
It is.
Worse.
Yeah.
Same thing. You got your power plugged in like you said?
Yeah. Same setup we just had.
No, it just was working.
Yeah, that's.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
I gotta take on this wave and figure out what's going on.
Okay, so can you turn on the mic again? Could you turn on the mic so I can just announce?
Can you turn the mic on?
Could you turn on the mic and the nose? Okay, so we have some technical issues here with the projector. So we are going to switch directly to the second talk and then come back to this talk. So the second talk is an artist talk about the piece Diversity Traces, an interactive lens to multiracial families in America. And it's being presented by Pedro Cruz, and we are going to play the video because Pedro is joining us online.
interactive visualization which places a lens on multiracial families in the United States. There are many ways to look at diversity within a population, but for this project, I'm looking at it from a racial perspective, categorizing race as reported by the census. I set myself to look at diversity within the households, within families, wanting to portray how common multiracial couples and their households are and how common they have been in the past. By assessing microdata from the census within all married couples in the US, I selected the ones that had different races. While census data can represent cultural and historical trends, there are also other reasons that can explain these trends. For example, prior to 1960, the census enumerator was responsible for categorizing persons, and the enumerator can be biased in this. Only after 1970, race can be reported by someone in the household. The 1960s surge of diversity can be seen in light of the ending of nationwide restrictions on multiracial marriages in 1967. Another surge after 2000 can be seen in the context that after this year, individuals can categorize themselves as being of multiple races, while previously they had to force themselves into categories not corresponding to their identities. Instead of aggregating data into groups or representing them with descriptive statistics, I try to preserve the granularity in the data by representing each multiracial household individually and showing them all together. For recent periods, I used 1% or 5% samples of the population, while in other periods we have 100% samples of the population, enabling you to see every multiracial couple that was ever registered. The couple is represented as two dashes, with heights proportional to their ages. These dashes are rendered and bended in such a way as if they resemble chromosomes, representing the intermingling within the household. The one at the left is the head of the household, regardless of sex. Race is represented in color and falls within the categories of Native American, Asian, Black, White, or multiple or other races. You can also see their children, positioned horizontally according to their ages as connecting strands within the household. You can see couples with no children or with 8, 11 or more children. It's also interesting to see the diverse ways in how children appear, taking one of the races of their parents, or instead as multiracial individuals. You can also spot same-sex couples highlighted like this, but only recently, due to the nationwide end of restrictions on same-sex marriage in 2015. In addition to race, individuals can also identify themselves as being Latinos or Latinas. This visualization project comes as a celebration of the fringe couples and families who have a multiracial identity, effectively embodying the intermingling of races and dissolving the systematic barriers put on their very own existence. I invite you to explore it at this URL. Thank you. Diversity traces.
Okay, we go back to the presentation. Could you just quickly turn on the microphone? Oh, you need it anyway, so you need to really speak into it. Okay, so I forgot to mention earlier, so if you have any questions, please post them on Slido. The Slido link should be on the Discord channel for the Mistletoe room we are in. So we will have actually the 3 talks first, and then we will have a question and answer Q&A with different authors. Okay, so now we have Shifting Winds, presented by Alec McGale.
All right, shifting winds. So this is a project in the intersection between visualization and the science of science and sociology of science. So we're bringing together data scientists and machine learning experts, as well as those that are interested in the history of science with visualization and design. I want to thank my co-authors, Jiaobao, Di, Hozhang, Ying, Julia, and myself. In this project, we looked specifically at mentorship as one of the most intimate or the most intimate relationship in academia, where by methodologies and perspectives are translated from academic generation to generation, with the sort of added perspective of how gender figures into that. So I'll just give a quick background on the gendered structure of science. So we've got all the way back to 1400, the year 1400 present. On the left are female scientists, at least in our mentorship tree data set. And on the right are males. So you can see that there are near or literally zero until the 1850s. And then there's this dramatic exponential rise until present where it's actually relatively equal. Here's another interesting plot we put into the paper showing the rate at which women have female mentees, that's the blue line, versus the rate at which males have male mentees, the green line. We can see that the female line doesn't reach above 50% until the year 2000. So there's still majority male mentees of female mentors until that time. These booms and busts here actually correspond to dramatic enterings and leavings of females in the disciplines corresponding with world wars. So some large-scale structural background. How did we build the trees and visualize this? We took this idea of tree heart and start at the seed, some focal mentor, some person that we're interested in, and plot all of their mentees coming out, either left if they're male or right if they're female. That's also the color here. White is unknown. And I guess I'll note now that although we use the word gender in the title, I think gender is a much broader term than what we're able to capture with this data. We're literally just encoding the typified gender identity of names, first names. So this is really just one shade of the sort of institutionalized process of gendering in society through naming. But we think it's a very interesting lens. Science. So plotting this out, we sort of wanted to understand the shape of these trees. Here's a famous scientist, Richard Feynman, famous physicist. We can see that his tree tilts quite substantially to the left, although we have this sort of lineage here in the middle, female to female to female to female. Something that we do see relatively often are consistent lineages which map female to female to female to female. We'll often see, and we'll see that also in their identifications, like they are feminists, they belong to gender in science committees, etc. This is a much more dramatic tree. Francis Galton was a very prolific scientist in the 1800s. And this is the tallest, physically, and the widest physically tree in our database, consisting of nearly 1,300 final mentees. So the structure and shape of this, we see it almost bending to the ground in some lineages, and there are many mentees who have a straight lineage of 14 generations of just males. These are our most female-leaning and most male-leaning trees in the end. So we just look at literally the angles of these outer leaves. And we see, so this is labeled Donald Reef, but I have in my notes that I can't access the name of this linguist who then had generation after generation of female mentees, and some of the subsequent generations were quite prolific. Johann Helfrich von Bühler, I think in this lineage is Kant, for instance. So philosophy being a very male-gendered field. Jane Goodall is an interesting case. We looked her up just out of general interest, and she has no mentees formally. So this sort of illustrates that formal mentorship is not the end-all be-all of the lineage of academic knowledge, and sort of gives us some more understanding of this data set. I'll just scroll through these. So on the website, you can see many of our individual cases. Donna Haraway, a very interesting case. Some more extremely prolific scientists and their descendants. You can see that, and you can see that there is a slightly different structure to these trees. This is the curliest tree, so to speak, which has the most male curled and female curled leaves in total. A last exercise was to visualize forests of individual research fields. So these are the most typically female and male leaned trees in our data sets, at least in the 16 fields that we investigated in this way, which may or may not be expected. You can see that history has a lot older trees. We only see one real substantial tree coming out of nursing. And if I have time, which I wasn't, let's see, I have a couple minutes. So we've also created a tool which allows you to, So this tree now also shows the roots of the researcher. So we can take the exact same analogy and look at not the descendants, the mentees of a researcher, but look at the mentors. This interactive tool allows you to look up any researcher you like, including current researchers. So if you are a researcher and watching this and are interested in your lineage, you can look back at your own roots spreading out below this. And I think that's my time. Thank you.
Can you turn off the mic again? Okay, thank you very much, Alec. Again, if you have any questions, please post them on Slido. We do a Q&A panel in a second. But before that, we have another artist talk given by Tim Albrecht from the Meta Lab at Harvard and the Meta Lab at FU Berlin. And this is the Me Too anti-network, and we'll see the video, and he'll join us virtually in a second.
Ms. Uta, we had an issue with that video. It was not ready for us, and we didn't have, he's been trying to download it to hopefully save the day, but unfortunately, we won't be able to play Kim's video.
Okay.
Not immediately. We might still be able. He's working on it.
Okay. Okay, we'll do the Q&A then right away with the two authors we have.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you turn on the microphone again?
That one's on.
Okay. All right. So I think so the first question, like, are there questions on Slido that we should bring in directly? Okay. Do you want to bring them up? Could we bring up the
Zoom?
two authors? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have Pedro. No, we don't have Pedro. Yeah, we have Jabo Lee joining us for the Q&A, and we do have Pedro. Who's? Sorry, I'm kind of confused right now. But do you want to read the first question, Bon? Do you want to come up with a question?
All right, so there is a question on Slido for Pedro coming from Nicole. So she asks, I'm not sure if I missed this, but how would children be represented that are the biological kids of only one of the people living in a household, for example, from previous relationship? Relatedly, how would or does it represent non-traditional family structures?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Nicole. Thank you for your question. It's a very good one indeed. Can you hear me well everywhere? Okay, good. We didn't look into that specifically. So what you have there is that if you have kids within a household, so we don't trace the biological origin, nor we can through the census data. There, more recently, it's indeed possible to look into whether the child came from one of the members in the household particularly, but that's not possible for later years. So yeah, that would make it a little bit more complicated in terms of the encoding and everything that we wanted to portray. But it's a very interesting point that you make. So how to go about this in order to be even more inclusive of non-traditional families, and when we and that's another way to look at diversity. Actually, that's we look at diversity here from a multiracial perspective, but there are many other ways to look at this. We, at a certain point in time, we do have to, I would say, stick with a certain problem here, with a certain design problem. But that's very interesting indeed. We did try to be as inclusive as possible here, so we are portraying same-sex couples. If we have that information, for example, the category of Latinos, which is an ethnical category beyond the racial one, we also include that there.
Great, thanks. Maybe more sketching to do then.
Yes.
Cool. So I have a question for Alec. So I was personally mentored by two supervisors. One is female and one's male, both traditionally. Could you please comment on how you might encode something like this, maybe for future, like just encodings, I guess, for shifting strands, shifting winds. Sorry.
Do you mean when there's multiple advisors?
Yeah.
That is taken into account. So when you're looking at mentee, so going in the descendants direction is what we call it. We do take all of the advisees, and going in the ancestors direction into the roots, we do take all advisors. So at each level, the node will grow out into all of the advisors. So in your case, you would see one advisor go one way and the other go the other way.
Right. So.
Okay, thank you so much. So there's lots more questions on Slido. Maybe we can take that offline because we have Kim Albrecht's talk ready now. So we'll play that, and then there's more space for questions also to the previous talks, if you like. So can we play Kim's video on the Me Too network? Anti-network, sorry, Me Too anti-network.
Situating Me Too. Situating Me Too, a project by Kim Albrecht with support from Catherine Ignacio, Cole Martin, and Matthew Battles. In 2017, the Schlesinger Library, which is a library focused on the history of women in America, started collecting tweets around the topic of Me Too. Until today, they have collected over 30 million tweets and invited researchers to look into the data. We wanted to visualize the data, and there are a couple of related projects. What they all have in common is a global perspective, what Donna Haraway calls a view from nowhere. They give a sense of false completeness, objectivity, and follow the superlatives of top city, most liked, most frequent, most shared. They filter and predefine the overview they try to serve. We looked into a random sample of 1 million tweets and looked into all the tweets with more than 100 retweets. In the end, about 900. The wet tweets you see here all violated the rules of Twitter. There are 28 tweets that are temporarily unavailable from deleted accounts. And in addition, there are a lot of political tweets, a lot of them around the topic of Donald Trump, the GOP, or Brett Kavanaugh. The tweets that you see on the screen in violet, only 9 tweets, are about personal experiences of abuse and harm. What this means is that the actual topic of Me Too is very much neglected within the networked system of Twitter. We created an interface to collect tweets that actually amplify the marginalized voices behind the actual tweets on the topic. How can we visualize data in which quantitative withdrawal is evident? We came up with 4 different visualizations. This one looks at tweets only with the hashtag MeToo. They're silent protests without saying anything. We looked into the hashtag why I didn't report. They're very much personal stories about abuse and harm. We looked into the term of indigenous. From the 1 million tweets, about 200 only mentioned the term indigenous. It's a very rare occasion. And we looked into the tweets from the 15th October 2017, before the movement was supposedly started by Elisa Milano. Cosmologists say that the most of the universe is structured by antimatter. We postulate that social media is similarly structured by the effects of the unobserved discourse and experience. The paradigm or the overview, the view from nowhere, the presentation of superlatives highlight the network and neglect otherness. The network, as a symbol of the digital society, is a mere illusion that only exists as a side note embedded in the unstructured and unobserved. Bots, politics, and hate defined the networked structure of Me Too. Our task was to find an alternative perspective on digital culture outside the networked, a mode to represent the urgent but neglected.
This flashlight can burn through.
Thank you so much, Kim, for the presentation. Can you bring Kim up for some questions and also the other authors that have spoken? Okay, so while people are maybe assembling more questions on Slido, I just have one directed to Kim, but also to Pedro and Alec potentially. So I feel like we see in the 3 visualization projects so far, visualizing questions around diversity, gender, inequality, abuse. So maybe like more sensitive societal phenomena. And I was wondering, do you think methodologies and visualization practices need to change in order to address these topics? So maybe Kim can comment on that, and but the other authors as well.
So I think so. I think you're totally right. We need to find new methodologies and new methods and new ways of exploring that. And but I don't have an answer yet. I'm not sure what this might be or how this might look like. But I think for me, like one thing that I'm very much interested in and that seems problematic is that what the way data is structured in general might exclude certain perspectives and certain things. We're very much like always dividing things. It's either this category or that category, and visualization is very good at that. But we are at the same time then missing the pieces that cannot be described in this manner, the things that are more fluid, that are not quite sure. Like it's very common to have bubble charts with different countries, but if you walk along the border of two countries, you see that they're not really separated. This is just something that we create, and that's something that visualization is very much hitting a wall, and I'm very much interested in these things that are crossing this boundary.
Thank you very much. Do the other authors want to comment? Jabo,
Yeah,
Pedro, or Alec?
Try to add a little bit to that. So yeah, as it was brought up by Nicole, sometimes we have more parameters than we can accommodate in the visualization space. And we also, from a representational perspective, since we're talking about people, we have really to think carefully about the abstraction. So we have to try to hit a sweet spot there between preserving the humanity of the people that we are representing, and while also trying to preserve their individuality, right? Because we have so much to portray. That's one of the reasons why I also try to show every couple that I was able to find in the census. So portray them as much as I could in the limited space that I had, visual space, to show their uniqueness, but differently for each person. And I also see that in Kim's work as he's portraying the text itself, right? The text, it's that text, right? So I think that even from the representational point of view, it's too much abstractions maybe can bring us farther apart from the humanity of the team.
I'll chime in as well. At first, thinking about this question, I do feel that the power isn't in the technology, it's in the mind. We could be able to use the existing technology to address these issues, but also, of course, there are limitations. Like, for example, in our case, so much data we used were labeled in a way that is binary gender, only male and female. And some are manually being checked, and also the language we're using kind of just put us in those boxes in the categories, as Kim mentioned, and that's kind of pretty obviously surfaced in this paper. Yeah.
Thank you so much. There's more questions on Slido, and unfortunately we are slightly behind time, so maybe we can continue discussions on Discord. But thank you very much to the 4 speakers in the first part of the session. Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll move on to the next part of the session. And for this would be more about the mingling between the physical and the virtual spaces. So the first talk will be about quarantiles, archiving expressive digital places from Instagram during the COVID-19 pandemic. It will be presented by Andrea Benedetti, but with co-authors Beatrice Govo, Giacomo Flame. Please play the
Hello
video.
everyone, I'm Andrea Benedetti and today I'm going to present Quarantiles, archiving expressive digital places from Instagram during the COVID-19 pandemic, on behalf of the other authors as well, Beatrice Gobbo and Giacomo Flein. This presentation will revolve around the design and production of Quarantiles, a book that is exhibited in this conference, which collects expressive digital places. Expressive digital places describe a peculiar usage of geolocation on social media expressively rather than descriptively. These expressive digital places tie emotions, ideas, causes, and states of mind to imaginary places that don't exist in the real world. However, due to the nature of Instagram, the platform that we inquired in this contribution, these imaginary places are usually associated with real-world locations. Our contribution is part of a two-step research that started in 2020. Anecdotally, we noticed the appearance of fake locations during the various lockdowns in Italy due to the pandemic. It was when vaccines were not yet available. In our previous publication, we explored how places called quarantine or quarantena in Italian, along with many variations, started to appear on our Instagram feeds. These raise the question, are these fake locations that common? In the end, after scraping the platform, we collected 800 places in total, and we decided to gather them on a profile by dividing the globe in tiles, each one containing a place associated with quarantines. The profiles served as a repository to collect expressive places and view pictures associated with them. However, we noticed that data can deteriorate inside the platform, and the second section of the research that we will discuss in this contribution tried to tackle this issue. In particular, three problems arose. Places may change name in time, they may get deleted, and pictures associated with that tag during quarantine times may get buried under new content or deleted altogether. To avoid this, we decided to work with the dataset constructed during the height of the pandemic, March 2020, and we decided to transfer it into a physical format. The archival activity took a design archetype, the catalog, to collect and list all expressive places. A catalog, by definition, is a complete enumeration of items arranged systematically. It allows to place emphasis on the sequentiality of items inside the design object. We decided to order the places in alphabetical order, placing great emphasis on the repetition of similar words with slight variations from one another. The data we were working with was divided into two main categories of geotags. The first group were the expressive places that had georeferenced coordinates. The other one did not have them. The second group of places were treated as a list at the end of the catalog. For places that were georeferenced, we performed two actions. The first, we collected imagery from Google Street View, which provides a feel of each expressive place. The juxtaposition of imagery and the expressive tag elicits reflection on how these two communicative layers interact with each other. Second, we transformed latitude and longitude into human-readable addresses to provide references to people that might be familiar with the geographical areas that we are representing. We collected 6 pictures for each location using a combination of Google APIs, D3.js, and browser extensions to download the images on our computers. After collecting all images from Google Street View, we experimented with some merging techniques with both Python and Photoshop. In the end, however, merging was scrapped, and separate images were used in the automatic generation of the book pages. The final dataset maps each variable to an element of the page. The final page has 6 images for each quarantine: the ID, the title, the georeference, and the human-readable address. 2 expressive places are on each double page, and the data displayed here is an assemblage of various sources of data. Google Street View imagery is used in the book to blend the expressive place with the real world. The book is divided into 5 sections, one per macro-geographical area. They serve as a table of content for the book as well. For each geographical area, we use a map to locate all quarantines on it. We plotted them with Mapbox at first, and later they were cleaned up using QGIS. The map is accompanied by the list of expressive places in the following section. The final result is a book of 272 pages divided into 5 sections and an additional one for each macrogeographical area, and the final section for all expressive places not directly associated with a real-world location. After completing the book, we were able to reflect on some key aspects both in the process and in the artifact itself. The experiment highlights interplay between the digital and the physical, blurring the line between two apparently separate spaces due to the construction of platforms and their affordances. In fact, expressive places still need georeferences due to how the platform is constructed by designers and engineers. Users, however, can reappropriate these affordances and twist them according to their needs, and this behavior is outside of the designer's control. On the process itself, the choice of tools is driven by the design archetype of the catalog, and it repurposes design tools to produce automatically an artifact that is closer to data visualization rather than a proper book. Additionally, the recontextualization of the data from the platform to a different medium highlights the peculiarities of the dataset, stripping it of its original context. Finally, the book's structure allows us to see the repetition of words with slight variations. And by combining various data sources, names of places and coordinates from Instagram, Google Street View imagery, and cartographic design, the book aims at exploring deeply the interplay of UI affordances, reappropriation, and the meaning of publishing data online. Rather than remaining abstract, data points become concrete and physical. I thank you on behalf of my colleagues Beatrice and Giacomo that worked with me on this project from the beginning, and I thank you all for your attention. Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much, Andrea. The next talk would be about the memory of street, Hong Kong, history, culture, memory, and post-humanism by Liu Chunshi Tracy and Wailam Noel Luke.
Hello, my name is Noah Luck. In this video, Tracy Liu and I are going to present our pictorial, The Memorial Street, Hong Kong History, Culture, Memory, and Post-Humanism. The Memorial Street is a Hong Kong-based project to present the post-humanist idea of defining mingling spaces with microorganisms. Unlike the usual process of naming human landmarks after famous people, important events, religious symbols, or a piece of collective memories, for example, Alexander House in Hong Kong was named after the Macedonian king. Hong Kong meaning the fragrance harbor, since Hong Kong used to be a major trading post for fragrance incense. Sai Yi Street meaning the laundry street because laundry business was prevalent there in the past. These stories they tell, however, often get forgotten over time, and location names gradually become disconnected from the current state of the street. As a result, we were inspired to use bacteria as a new narrative for the post-humanist stories associated with peak places. To do this, we conducted a series of microbiological procedures to cultivate and visualize the bacterial perspective of 4 landmarks in Hong Kong. 4 significant places on Hong Kong Island were selected for the experiment. They are Taiping Sun Street, Ice House Street, Hong Kong Tramways, and Star Ferry. Each of them has a unique and impactful story in the history of Hong Kong. For instance, Taiping Sun Street witnessed the refugee crisis in 1860s, and I House Street, Hong Kong Tramways, and Star Ferry witnessed the rapid socio-political growth of Hong Kong through ice supplies and public transportation development in the 19th to 20th century. After collecting microbes from the 4 selected places in Hong Kong, we cultivated their bacteria on our 3D printed Hong Kong Island landscape model, which we have coated agar on its surface, according to their specific locations. We incubated the cultured bacteria at a controlled temperature of 37 degrees Celsius for 28 days in order to get significant results. This is the result on the 28th day. We then proceeded to make use of the result to stimulate bacterial growth back onto the surface of our 3D printed Hong Kong Island model through 3D rendering. This is our final result. The green highlight on the landscape represents the bacteria in the 4 places, which is projected based on the bacteria distribution, shapes, and patterns grown on the agar surface of the installation. Moving on, we are going to talk about our inspiration and explain the philosophical and biological reasons for choosing microbes as the narratives of the mingling space.
Philosophically, there are 3 main ways to define space: realism, constructivism, and phenomenalism. An example is mentioned in Bangkok. People may conjure up images of hectic streets packed with people, heavy traffic, and all kinds of business there. These images are evoked by objective social political events of the place. Simultaneously, to people who are familiar with the place, Bangkok, phenomenologically speaking, may have their feelings and senses aroused, which are both senses of space and time. However, these 3 perspectives share a common feature is that they all tend to deal with places from the current point of time only, because it is just nature for humans to base our thoughts on recent events. Considering this, we are inspired to define space by taking the entire timeline of history into account, instead of just a small episode in the flow of time. What defines a street? Some may simply say that it is the street name defines it. Others may say they define a street based on the collective memories or their personal experiences. Taken together, we concluded that the general definition of streets is based on 3 elements: history and culture, local human activities, individual and collective memories. Bachelor writes, "When I relive dynamically the roads that climb the hill, I'm quite sure that the road itself has muscles, or rather, counter muscles." We choose bacteria as the main narrator to express our idea, because it allows us to read the world from the perspective of a continuous timeline rather than a particular time point. The bacterial community harbors the memory, time, and history of the place in the form of the species composition of the community and the gene pool of individual species. Genes are amplified in the gene pool of a species based on the adaptive advantage endowed by the products of these genes. Some of the genes, after being amplified to meet these challenges, remain as the genetic remnants even after these challenges disappear. The short life cycle of bacteria, typically measured in hours instead of decades, makes these microorganisms accumulate genetic polymorphisms much faster, make bacteria ideal for accumulating evolutionary changes. The community structure and the genomic signature of microbes, indicated by the whole genome sequencing and by genetic markers, such as the sequencing heterogeneity in the 16S rRNA genes, are location-specific. For example, the gut microbiota of individual humans are unique. Briefly, from the above 5 points, these microbes are the witness of all the events that happen from past to the current, from individual to populations. They are dependent on human activities, of course, because we are a part of their environment. At the same time, they could influence the human back. Vertically, they could show the evolutions and changes based on their timing, while horizontally, they could represent the mingling spaces raised by human behaviors, movements, and migrations based on their types. Although memories may flicker, they never truly disappear. The growing bacteria is a good proof. In a post-humanism way, we avoid the disturbance of the subjective definition of human beings by human beings and take bacteria as the dominant place. The final product is a visual poem of bacteria who tells us all the memories about old streets of Hong Kong, the culture, and the history.
Hello, my name is Noah.
Thank you for that. Our next talk will be presented by Luis Ludwig, who's actually here with us. So as he's just setting up, so the title of this talk is Tangled Tracks, and it's by Luis Ludwig and Doris Kozminski. So while they're setting up, I would just like to remind people to please post your questions on Slido. We will be saving all of these questions as well for later on and send it to the authors so that the conversations can continue online, either on Discord or, personal connections later on.
Can I go? Oh, cool. Yep. Oh, it's there. Yep. So I'm gonna present today Tango Tracks, which is a work that I made with Doris Kuzminski. And it consists of 16 red and white tiles, ceramic tiles with projection. And they register the real and the virtual paths that I took during 2 months. In our post-pandemic daily life, the boundaries between the physical and the virtual have been blurred a lot, and a new complex crossings emerged. And in a poetic way, this artwork makes us think a little bit about the complex tangles formed by our movement across the world. The red tiles show real roots, while white tiles show virtual roots. The process of capturing the paths was done differently according to the type of the path. So this one is for the red ceramic tiles that contain drawings of physical paths that I took. So I use as GPS to register my rides and my walks, and they are there. And on the other hand, in the white ceramics, we have some virtual paths. Every time I use a video conferencing software, for example, Zoom or Google Meet, I registered this virtual path, and it was traced considering the global information infrastructure network and the location where the headquarters of the technology companies are based. In this way, it was possible to create shapes that show the paths taken by the artist virtually, from a mapping of possible flows of information and data. I use optical fiber backbone maps, for example, to create these virtual path drawings. So during 2 months, all this geolocated data from the roots and data about the information infrastructure were collected. Then the drawings of the paths were laser cut, and they were transposed to the clay in an engraving process, creating a relief result. Each tile was handmade and engraved with a path in a process that blended manual and computational. In this artwork, clay is the surface that registered the paths. Clay goes back to the artistic traditions of antiquity and evokes primitive reliefs, carvings, and footprints. As much as the tile manufacturing is done by hand, the result highlights inaccuracies and emphasizes the material properties. After the paths were traced onto the clay, the tiles were fired in a high-level temperature, respecting the traditions of pottery, giving greater hardness and durability to the tiles. In the exhibition, the tiles, I invite you guys to go to the exhibition, and we invite the people to use and rearrange the paths so they can create new routes and fabulate their own stories. The public is invited to form their own paths. The title of the work also evokes a hybrid experience, which we are dealing with. We carry out several real and virtual journeys nowadays, but we can no longer clearly separate them. Often, real and virtual trails happen simultaneously, generating a tangle of routes and locations. So Tango Tracks is a participatory data physicalization work that poses questions about our presence in the real and virtual world at the present time. And the artwork seeks to question cartography concepts and expand the possibilities of understanding our being in the world today. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Luis.
Yep.
So the last talk would be about ISIS sharing #UC, an emotion-driven audiovisual installation by Sergio M. Rebello, Mariana Cesa, Pedro Martins, Joao Bicker, Panausel Machado. Will be presented by Sergio. Please show the video.
Hi folks, I am Sergio Rebelo. Currently I am a PhD candidate and I'm invited teaching assistant at the University of Coimbra in Portugal. And my presentation today concerns the artwork SE Star Sharing SUC, which I developed with Mariana Ceissa, Pedro Martins and my PhD supervisors, João Bicar and Penosal Machado. SE Star Sharing SUC is a motion-driven audiovisual installation which creates a physical space that presents virtual data shared online on Twitter about the university and the city of Coimbra. This installation is a hybrid space where the online data leaves the borders of the digital space and is presented in the corresponding physical space. The content and the features of the presented audiovisuals are influenced by the audience in an indirect way through their tweets. The installation was designed for the particular art gallery Museu of Círculo Artes Plásticas de Coimbra. It is a urban exhibition space designed to be simultaneous a urban sculpture and always open exhibition space. The installation presents a hybrid nature, being accessible both in a physical art gallery and online. Briefly, in the two configurations, one may observe a set of generative poster designs while listening to an ambient sound. The presented artifacts were created reflecting the emotional charge of the collected tweets by an autonomous computational creativity approach. So, they are generated through three models. The input pre-processing model that predicts the emotional context of the input tweets, the typesetter model that automatically generates the poster designs, and finally the motion sonification system, or SIS, that generates the ambient audio. The input processing model recognizes the emotions on the tweets, so it is responsible for collecting, analyzing, and classifying the tweets. This process begins with the translation of the text to English, if it is not already in that language, and the collection of some features related to the text, for instance, the length of the text, the hashtag, the emojis, etc. Next, the tweets are emotionally classified by a neural network. We train this network to recognize the 8 emotions of Protic theoretical model. This model is also responsible for subdividing the text into lines at the end. On the other hand, the typesetter model designed the posters. The visual features of the posters are defined by considering the previous recognized emotional data. The poster's background style, colors, and typefaces are selected at random based on a set of predefined possibilities defined by us on a specific type of configuration file. In the end, the model composed the poster design using a iterative greedy approach to modify the visual features of open-type variable font with multiple axes. We developed two typesetting operators that are used in an iterative way. The first one modifies the size of the typefaces, and another one selects an axis of the typeface and changes its values. Finally, the SIS model generates the ambient sound that reflects the predominant emotions on the posters present on the installation. This audio composition is generated by a rule-based system where the musical parameters are dynamically chosen according to a predefined probabilities and the predominant emotions. We conducted two experiments with this approach to study and analyze how these audiovisuals are perceived by people, as well as to assess the design capabilities of its generative models. So, to test the generative performance of the system, we selected 16 texts with varied lengths and multiple textual and emotional purposes, and next experimented with the presented approach, generating 300 poster designs for each text. These experiments unveil that the proposed approach can consistently create finished and legible posters in a few operations and time. On the other hand, to understand how the audiovisuals on the installation were perceived by people, we conducted 12 interviews with participants ranging from 23 to 31 years old. Half of the participants were professional graphic designers, the other half were from varied backgrounds. We create these interviews focused on evaluating the visual diversity and coherence of the posters and the emotional perception and expressiveness of the installation of the visuals. Concerning the visual diversity and coherence of the posters, in a nutshell, the evaluation sessions revealed that the typesetter model generates diverse poster designs. However, it has revealed to be more efficient in the creating visuals, cohesive outputs, and diverse. On the other hand, the interview sessions also unveiled that some emotions present on output were both recognized by the machine learning classifier and the people. We observed that several emotions, such as joy, anger, and sadness, were more conceptually recognized by the people, where posters were visualized along with audio, obtained comparable results. Nevertheless, we recognize that the perception of emotion is a subjective task influenced by a social and the cultural context of the observer, and you also admit that the presented emotional visual mapping has still presented some biases, since it was built over the rules of Western audiovisual designs and presents some cultural limitations. In your evaluation experiments, we are also interested in studying the future implication of this type of creativity approaches. Since the time of this presentation is limited, we invited everyone to read more about your evaluation experiment as well as your installation and your approach in your paper. Currently, we are exploring new installations configurations and we are studying how the proposed approach can be used in other creativity and commercial scenarios. This way, future work on this project will focus on these topics. So I am finishing my presentation here, so be free to contact me via email or a message on my social networking, whatever. If you have any question or suggestions. Thank you all for all the attention.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Can we please bring in all of the speakers up for the discussion panel? Awesome. Cool. So while we're waiting for questions on Slido, I do have something more of a general question for all of the speakers. So we all know that it's important and very timely to think about mingling between the physical and the virtual or digital. And can you all comment on how your work or visualizations in general reimagines the way we're currently doing this in HCI and Viz? And what can the greater Viz community take and possibly apply to their own works as we move forward? Feel free to just unmute yourself and if you want to talk.
Maybe I can start. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So personally, I think that in the case of our project, the thing that we really focused on was since we in the first part of this project we worked with the digital, we tried to go back to something physical, to something tangible that I don't think it's really granted when working with this kind of material as like data and stuff. I think it's easier to find, it's easier to go straight to the digital, but in this case we try to really focus on what does it mean to create something that is tangible and that can be a way to sediment something that happens and it may be fleeting in the digital space, let's say. So I think that was one of the key points that came up to us when we were creating this book of places that are not really real in the sense that they don't belong to the physical world, but they kind of interplay with it.
Maybe may I answer this question? For our memory of the streets, we collect the bacteria from the streets in Hong Kong, and it's kind of physical linking to the space memory of that area. And after the collections, we kind of incubate the bacteria in labs, and also like the bacteria own its own genetic data. And we also do the 3D modeling of those bacteria, which is actually constructed from the physical world to a digital world. So that's it, our linking to physical and also our digital perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I? You are very interested in explore the idea that currently exists two spaces, a digital space and a physical space that most of the time they not blend between them, because, for instance, a city is a city on the people living in the city, and at the same time online communities talk about the city, talk about the persons that live in that city, talk about the history and legacy of that city. And when you start working this project, you look to the Coimbra history from a perspective of European history and Portuguese and history, and also the impact that some decisions in the city have in the country history. And you understand that people talk a lot about this online, but in physical space, people do not really think about it. It's like a thing in the past, and you start to create this project, think about this, connecting the two blending the two communities between them, and create a space that enables people to reflect about what is this space in the other dimension, and what's the difference between the definition of this space in other dimension and in my dimension, in the physical and online, vice versa.
Luis, do you want to add something? All right. There is a question for you from Slido, though.
Okay.
All right. Did the material aspect of this project give you the most challenges, and what were they?
Good question. So yeah, I used to. I'm a designer, an artist. So I used to use softwares like Illustrator or make some codes with processing, and they are so precise. So I had to plot X and Y, and it was so super precise. And with ceramics and clay, I couldn't achieve that. So, and especially when we go to the firing process, it changes a lot. So it distorts so much. So as long as the process, I had to embrace that, as a part of the process. So when I was talking about the project, I struggled a lot in the beginning, but now I see that it was very important to free me a little bit of the precision of data visualization.
Nice, thank you.
And a lot of tiles broke. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a pitfall.
All right.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. I think
there's one. Oh, yes. Can you come to the mic?
I can quickly.
Thank you for your presentations. I wanted kind of to ask about this, let's say, yeah, we talk about like digital or virtual, which looks like very material, but in the end, the infrastructure, where this data goes, how it comes and so on, is really physical. And more we live in this kind of intangible cloud, actually, it's more the infrastructure is actually reclaiming the space and even the changing the landscape, and also, unfortunately, also changing the climate. So I think it's very important to do this kind of physical works, what reflects on the digital behavior and systems. So maybe Luis, you can comment like a bit more about your virtual trips, like especially when we had this, you know, lockdown and everything was in Zooms and so on. It felt like we are meeting nowhere, like we are meeting somewhere online. But actually, like, what did you find out with these connections? Because in the end, for instance, I think on the first wave, at least in Europe, the Netflix had to cut their streaming quality because, you know, the internet provider said like, yeah, our cables are exploding, you know. So it would be interesting to hear more about your maybe virtual trips, how they happened actually in the physical space. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, and you bring an important thing that we think data is immaterial, you know, and is a myth, you know, data is somewhere, you know, so it's really interesting that. About the work, the virtual trips, it was really interesting to see where I go all the time. I always go to California, you know, the headquarters of every place virtually I go is California, you know, so it was really interesting to see that, because it starts a little bit, I start to map a cartography of power, you know, so every connection goes through the United States. It reminds me a lot about the Mark Lombardi data visualizator. Is that a word? Is the guy who tried to map the power. So I think I found this patterns, you know, always go through, not Europe, not that much, just once. Yeah, on the other side, yeah. But a lot of California, not all the US, only California. Sorry? To track myself? No, just myself. I was as a notebook. I was. Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice.
Should we just, it's like we have 1 minute left. There's one question for Andrea, but maybe that can be taken on Discord offline. So maybe let's give a round of applause to our artists and speakers that talked today. Thank you very much. And there will be another VISAP session tomorrow morning at 9 in the same room here as well.
Right, and I also want to add some of these are also on display at the Automobile Alley, so please visit them if you haven't been. Yeah. They're very cool to interact with. So, yeah.
And you can also visit the website. So we also have a virtual exhibition with lots of links and connections that were mentioned. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we have actually copied them all to Discord, like one of the SVs did that, yeah. Sorry for the technical problems. Sorry. Thank you everyone for joining us online, and sorry for the technical issues at the beginning. Bye.